Hey folks, it's Gary here, doing my first video for the VC. Um, Selected a bunch of albums. I wanted to try to do things thematically, not just for my first video, but actually for all of them. But I moved 2 years ago, and most of my vinyl is still in storage containers. And I had a few ideas of specific vinyl I wanted to show and favorite albums and tell the stories behind them. And most of those I couldn't find. But I did find a bunch that were favorites that I wanted to show, a little bit of a mixed bag here. And figured I would just go with what I found and give you a little bit of history. I am doing this video thanks to Carm. I want to thank Carm for giving me the encouragement to do this after watching many of his videos. I don't think mine are going to be as thoughtful as his, probably not as analytical, but hey, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring here, and maybe people will see things that they like, they never heard of, whatever. Um, so as I said, a bunch of the albums that I wanted to show, I couldn't actually find, but I did find a bunch that I did want to talk about, and oddly enough, I hope the VC is not going to come at me with pitchforks and torches when I say this, but I grew up in the age of vinyl, certainly in the 60s and 70s. Still have probably about 70% of my vinyl collection. Don't play it much, to be honest. I have a lot of vinyl albums, especially some of the ones I'm going to show today, and that are favorites of mine, some of which have still not come out digitally or on CD or anything else since the vinyl days. Um, but a lot of my favorite albums are very quiet things, and they got a lot of play. And I did notice over the years the degradation in the sound quality and the vinyl getting worn and the clicks and pops that drove me crazy. So when CDs came out, one of the first things I did was start to buy CD copies of my vinyl albums. And I did notice a difference, especially when you're dealing with quiet music, whether it's classical music or jazz or anything else that's not rock or that doesn't have a lot of drums. A lot of drums and cymbals and white noise and noisy electric guitars kind of do a good job of covering vinyl noise. But when you take things out of the mix and maybe you have something that doesn't have drums on or isn't loud or it's quiet sections, you really begin to appreciate how quiet CDs can be compared to the vinyl. And I'll get into a couple of those that I'm showing here today definitely fit in that category. I'm going to start. It's probably apt. I wanted to play this in the background, and I chose not to, just because I'm really hesitant to do videos, to be honest with you. But I also didn't want to get pulled by the copyright police. And the things that I intended to play in the background was going to be some ECM music, famous German jazz label. And I thought for sure I might get a copyright infringement and the video would never get seen. But I was going to play this particular first album I was going to show because it's definitely a desert island disc for me. Definitely my favorite one by one of my favorite composers. There's going to be a lot of glare on the screen here, but here we go with Eberhard Weber's Fluid Russell. Love, love, love that album cover done by his late wife, Maja Weber. Um, fits the music. Fits the music beautifully. I loved her. Her drawings are very, very simple. But if you can see this through the glare, or you have the album and you know it, um, it's just it's just fantastic. It's a fantastic album. These little landscapes, simple as they are, that she drew, is perfect for the music. And again, this is one of the first things I bought. I bought this. This was recorded in '79. And again, this is one of those quiet albums I was talking about where you really notice the surface noise on the volume on the vinyl when and if it gets worn, because there's no real drums on this. There's Bonnie Herman and Norma Winstone, great vocalists, uh, singing melodies, no lyrics, no words. Again, the voice is used as an instrument. So there's two vocalists, Gary Burton on vibraphone and marimba, Eberhard Weber on bass, and Terang. I'm not sure what Terang is. That might be the one slightly, there's like a bass drum thumping in there, and a couple times in the music, and it's the only slightly percussive thing in there. And Bill Frisell on guitars, and balalaika, which is a little, I think that's Greek stringed instrument, a little bit, very effective. But that's it. There's five musicians, two of them are vocalists. No drums, no real percussion. Um, and this was my introduction to Bill Frisell, and I learned years later um, that this was his first big time recording session because I liked his style. He's very sparse on this recording, and I really liked his playing. Had never heard of him before, and I bought this shortly after it came out, probably about 1980, and went looking for something and couldn't find anything else by him. It was only years later that I found out this was his first recording session. Subsequently, he did record more for ECM as a sideman and eventually did his first solo album. But I hadn't heard of him prior to this, and I wondered why, and it was only years later that I found out. But this is a Desert Island Disc for me. Not only is it my favorite Eberhard Weber album, probably one of my top five albums of all time, this particular copy is still sealed. Um, I bought the album and played the original album so much that I did what I did to all my precious albums, and that is I didn't want to wear them out any longer, so I started copying them to cassette tape and would listen to the cassette tape copies of the albums. So I'd get like a 90-minute cassette tape. Typically, that would be long enough to fit a full album on one side of the cassette tape, and then I'd stick another album by the same artist on the other side of the cassette tape. Would save my vinyl, prevent that from wearing out any longer, and not have to flip over the album to hear the whole thing. Plus, I could take the tapes in my car and play them. And I did that to all of my favorite albums, especially the ones that I got fairly worn out from multiple plays. I probably recorded this one onto cassette tape so many times that I wore the original out anyway. A few years after getting it, I bought this copy, the second copy, which is still sealed, which I never opened. Um, Waiting for the first copy to get so bad that I just had to crack open the second one. And in the interim, before I got a chance to open the second copy, what happened was CDs came out. And I very quickly, this is one of the first purchases ever made on compact disc, was to buy Fluid Russell on compact disc. And that's how I've been listening to it ever since. It was my introduction to, wasn't the first, it was my second Eberhard Weber album. First time I heard Bill Frisell, one of the first times I heard Gary Burton, oddly enough, even though he's much better known than Eberhard Weber. And first time I heard Norma Winstone. First time I heard Bonnie Herman. Bonnie Herman was in a jazz vocalese group. I want to say it's Singers Unlimited, but I think that may be wrong. I'm not sure. But she didn't record for ECM again. Norma Winstone, well, she's got quite a history with ECM. And what happens, I think, with most people get into ECM, they buy an album and they like it, and they do what I do. Hey, who played on this album? And I like them, and I discovered Gary Burton, and I'll go buy a Gary Burton album, and went looking for Bill Frisell albums, and bought other Eberhard Weber albums, and on other Eberhard Weber albums, there's other musicians on there like Rainier Bruninghaus, the great keyboard player. And so you start looking for albums by them. So next thing you know, you pretty much have half of the ECM record collection. I'm going to choose another one here. Forgive me for being off camera for a second. This one was a real find for me. This is the first used album I ever bought in my life, and one of the few. I've only bought vinyl when I when the records were absolutely impossible to find new. They were out of print, not available on CD or anything. And speaking of how one record leads into the other, Norma Winstone, something called The Edge of Time, big egg on the cover. You see that? I got a lot of glare on my screen here. But this, I believe, was her first solo album. This is from 1972 on the Argo record label. It's a Decca, part of the Decca Records um, branch of Decca Records or subsidiary of the Decca Records. And this looks like this was an import because it's got the London address of Decca Records on there. And Norma's looking quite young in the back. I'm going to try to, oh, boy, that glare is killing me, huh? See a picture of Norma there. And if you've seen her, through the years, you realize she's very, very, very young here. Um, Fantastic album. I actually, the store that I bought this in was a little local record shop here in New Jersey. I actually have two copies in the sleeve of the same. They had two used copies of the same album. Very strange. It's such an obscure album. I'm not sure if this ever came out on CD. Um, but this is a big band, and I really like to hear Norma in her band, like Azimuth, where you're dealing with only three musicians. Uh, I like to hear her voice. I like to hear her in smaller, intimate settings. This is a huge band, so this is a whole big arranged thing. Alan Skidmore, tenor sax, Frank Riccati on vibraphone, John Taylor playing electric piano, which was her co-leader in Azimuth, who turned out to be her husband, which I didn't know for years. They were married for decades. Um, Tony Levin on drums, so not the same Tony Levin that we have here in America. Chris Lawrence on bass. So if you follow ECM at all, a few of those names are going to sound familiar. Kenny Wheeler also plays on this album, so you've got the entire Azimuth trio playing on this album. Chris Lawrence, Tony Levin, Mike Osborne, Chris Pine, Paul Rutherford on euphonium. Big band. There's like three, four trumpet players on some of these tracks. So it's a very arranged thing. Um, Most of these, there's one track that's for three piece and another one that's for five piece. But for the most part, these are very big band type of things. And oh yeah, actually, in the reading the notes, I should have maybe read this again before I did the video. Norma has a short note in the back here saying that this is her first solo effort. I would like to find this on CD, to be honest with you, because the vinyl's a little noisy, even though this is a fairly this is not a quiet, intimate record with drums and horn sections and all that. But maybe the recording quality isn't the greatest. This is not an ECM recording, um, so it's probably the sound could be a little better. But I would love to. This is one of those things I would love to hear on CD, to be honest with you. All right, let me go. Let's see what else I got here. Keeping up with the ECM thread. These aren't all ECMs that I have today. Um, I picked this one only because, again, this is one of my favorites. This one is out on CD, and it's another one that I'm glad is on CD because it's another quiet one. My favorite album by John Abercrombie, and the only album he did like this, Characters, solo album. His only all solo album ever. Love that cover. Love that cover. Is there anything on the back to look at? Not much. Song listing, picture of the young John. Recorded in November of '77. This is the only recording that John did totally solo. Um, just him, acoustic six-string guitar, electric six-string guitar, and his electric mandolin, which looked like a little miniature Stratocaster with four strings, um, which absolutely defined his sound back in the '70s, especially the late '70s. And it was the kind of thing that he would write a song, and a lot of his MO was to do the basic chord structure of the song, play it on guitars, and double the melody or play the main melody a lot of times on this electric mandolin, which had a limited range, a very high pitch, but it's a sound that came to define him at this time. My absolute favorite period of his. And I know John had a house fire. I don't know when it was. I want to say probably sometime in the 80s, in the early to mid 80s. And I think his electric mandolin was one of the things that was lost, and he hasn't played it since. I don't think he has it anymore, and it's a shame because that was just one of those. It's great. It's very hard for me, I think, for a lot of these people to do a solo album with limited limited number of instruments to keep it interesting for the whole duration. This one's about 45 minutes, typical vinyl running time. And something like solo piano, sometimes you begin to tune out by the end of it. By the time you reach a certain point, 20, 30, 40 minutes, whatever it is. But with this album, even though he's really only got three instruments here, he uses enough different settings and colors on the electric guitar specifically, and with the electric mandolin in there, and the overdubs he uses, um, it doesn't get samey sounding. One track to the next, there's enough variation to keep you interested the whole time. And there's a hell of a lot more acoustic guitar on here than I've ever heard him play in any other setting on any of his other albums, even the ones he did with Ralph Towner. So that's a favorite, and that's another one that the vinyl got kind of worn. And again, there's not a lot of noisy stuff going on this record, and as a result, the vinyl noise was quite noticeable. And this is another one that I recorded onto cassette tape a million times, just in an attempt not to wear down the vinyl anymore. So let's see what's next. Totally unrelated. I'm not doing these in any order because I've got another ECM. This is an album that I found probably in the early 80s. And it's the first, I didn't know anything about the composer, Morton Subotnick, who's still alive, born in 1933. Um, Electronic music pioneer for sure. I'm not sure if he still lives in New York, but he taught in university in New York for many, many years. Probably still lives there, still actively doing music. And I just read tonight that he's involved with creating apps that do music and stuff. I'm just amazed at that because I don't even do anything with apps. And he's just so far ahead of his time. And I have this album. I'd never heard of him or it when I bought it, and the glare is going to kill you. But it's a picture of a snake. The album is called Sidewinder, and you can see I bought it new and sealed for the incredible price of $2.99. Um, in a regular record store in the 80s, in the early 80s, just before CDs came out. And this was a clearance thing, and this is on Columbia Records. I had to search high and low to find a date. There's no date mentioned anywhere on the album, even in the copyright when I pulled out the vinyl. And you're reading the label and looking for the information on the label. Nothing. So I went on Wikipedia, where they have a biography on him, and found out this is from 1971, which doesn't surprise me. It's listed as being created by Morton Subotnick on the Electric Music Box, is what they call this huge analog synthesizer. I don't think you're going to be able to see it in the picture. Maybe you can see the picture. The old fashioned. Maybe you can see him. It's got the cables and the plugs, and if you're into the early Klaus Schulze electronic music scene from Berlin, um, from the late 60s and early 70s, before even Purple Blues' first album, even before the digital era, when they had these huge monophonic synthesizers. Um, that's what he's using here, and that's all that appears on here. And to be honest, listening to it, it's not incredibly musical. Um, it's more sound effects. I think it's called Sidewinder, and there's a picture of a snake on the cover because the opening vibe, the sound that you hear sounds like a snake hissing. Um, it's kind of a weird piece. It's it's almost more sound effects. And there's two 14-minute sides, so it's a very short album. And Sidewinder Part 1, Sidewinder Part 2. That's it. About 28 minutes, the whole thing. Um, Weird album, and I bought it just because of my interest in early electronics. I had not heard of Subotnick, and like I said, I bought it in the '80s. So this is before you go on the internet and go look for things. Okay, what's next? Obviously, not going in any order because I'm going back to ECM, and going back to my discovery of Eberhard Weber's Fluid Russell album and the people from it, and getting into Norma Winstone as a result of the Fluid Russell album, getting into Gary Burton as a result of the Fluid Russell album, and especially getting into Mr. Bill Frisell, which turned out to be his very first solo album and my favorite thing he's ever done, in line on ECM, which the Fluid Russell album by Eberhard Weber that I first heard him on came out in '79, and this was recorded in August of '82. So a few years later, it took before ECM really signed Frisell as a solo artist. And this is the only. I love this album cover. Interestingly, Maja Weber, who, as I mentioned, was Eberhard Weber's late wife, who did the art for all of Eberhard Weber's albums. This is the only other album that I'm aware of that she ever designed a cover for. And I believe Bill Frisell either met her when he recorded Fluid Russell for Eberhard Weber, or just was familiar with Eberhard Weber's album covers and liked them, so that when he came around to record his first album for ECM, he went and asked Maja Weber to do his album cover, and she did a. See, there's like 20 miniature pictures on here of landscapes, and it's very very similar to the Fluid Russell album cover. And now, sadly, when this got re-released on CD, it is available on CD, which I have. They changed the album cover completely, and I guess that's because these 20 pictures on 12 by 12 vinyl, they're quite small on vinyl as it is. Um, maybe these are 2-inch squares, not even that each one of the pictures is contained in. You shrunk that down to a CD size booklet, you wouldn't even be able to see the pictures. Um, so they completely obliterated and changed the cover when they released it on CD, which I'm a little sad of. I kind of wish that maybe they would have picked one or two of the paintings that Maja Weber did, and just stick a couple on the cover, maybe stick a couple on the back cover of the CD booklet, maybe sprinkle some of the others throughout a couple pages on the CD booklet, because these are really lovely pictures she's done. And now they're kind of lost to time because the only place that you're going to see them is on the vinyl, the original vinyl issue of Bill Frisell's In Line. An album I love because I'm particularly partial to solo albums where one musician plays all the instrumental parts himself, especially through overdubbing. And that's what Bill did here. He does have Harold Anderson, the great upright bass player, playing on let me see, on 4 or 5 of the tracks. There's about 9 tracks on the album, but at least 4 of the longer tracks are Bill just totally solo on electric and acoustic guitars, and very processed electric guitars, and quite good. I really like this album. To me, he never made a better one, but that's because I like that sparse early style that he had when I heard him play on Fluid Russell, and this is very close to that mode. Okay, what else do I have? This is going a lot longer than I anticipated, and I'm wondering if maybe I shouldn't even bother to show some of these. Um, so I think I'm gonna try to keep this under a half hour, which I can't believe I've gone this long, and stick with ECM. The other records I have here aren't ECM, and stick with an ECM that is very sadly something that they did not re-release again on CD or digitally or since it came out, and that is Double Image's Dawn album. And I have to apologize for the glare. Um, this is I'm on a desktop computer. I don't have a laptop to use, and so I'm very kind of stuck in my locale here in the corner of my bedroom. And unfortunately, there's not much to see. There's not much of a scenic view here. But like I said, I'm on a desktop computer, and I'm kind of tethered to this spot. So maybe for the future, I'll try to create some kind of ambiance. I kind of like Carm's kitchen. He does this in his kitchen. A lot of the VC members obviously are around their vinyl collections, and Meals you've got to see is a door in the background there in my light and my wall. But getting back to Double Image, this is a fantastic ECM album, and there's a handful of albums that I just don't understand that they haven't re-released till at this point. Gallery from the early '80s being one of them, which had David Darling on cello, and just fantastic group. Paul McCandless from Oregon was also in Gallery. Uh, fantastic band. And for some reason, just they never bothered to put that one out. Edelhard Reudinger, who's a German bassist, who did a fantastic album that I will dig out and show sometime. Um, Another one, and just like this, Double Image Dawn, which is an album recorded in October 1978. Dave Samuels, vibraphone and marimba, David Friedman on vibraphone and marimba, Harvey Schwartz on upright bass, and Michael DePasqua drums and percussion. I saw Michael DePasqua, who sadly decided to retire from the music industry. And my favorite drummer, kit drummer in the world, is John Christensen. And there's not too many. He just, to me, invented an entire new style, and not too many people picked up on it. Jack DeJohnette can play very well in the John Christensen style, and has many times, especially when he recorded for ECM. So Jack, fantastic Jack DeJohnette, is able to play that style as well, though he doesn't do it quite as much anymore. Um, and Mike DePasqua was the only other guy that really picked up on that style, and he's an American. Um, and he did so fantastically. And when John Christensen was off doing a lot of other projects, Mike DePasqua started picking up in the late '70s, early '80s on ECM Records. He started getting a lot of those uh, gigs for recording sessions for ECM artists that didn't have a set band. And so he was part of Double Image. And he did a fantastic job. And he was part of Gallery. He was on that Gallery album I talked about. I believe he was the drummer for the Edelhard Reudinger album I was talking about in the early '80s. He played in the Jan Garber group, and I saw him play in the Jan Garber group in New York in '82, '83, and absolutely fantastic. He played probably the most imaginative drum solo I've ever seen, because it wasn't based on let me show you how much noise I can make and impress you, or let me show you my chops. He played this very musical, very melodic, very advanced solo that I just wish they had recorded, because it was unlike anything I heard prior to that. Probably something John Christensen could do again, but I haven't seen John Christensen do it, only because it's not recorded and I've never seen John live. Um, but absolutely fantastic solo, and I got to speak to him after the show. Sweet guy, wonderful guy. I believe he lives in Florida, and didn't play for many years. And after Eberhard Weber had his stroke, and went back to some old tapes, looking to release some of his bass solos and dress them up a bit. He had Mike DePasqua come out of retirement, go over to France, where Eberhard Weber lives, and record some drum parts to his pre-recorded bass solos on his prior album, and called Resume or Resume. Came out in 2013, I want to say. Fantastic album. And but apart from that, Um, I think he's only recorded one other album since his retirement in the early 80s, and that was again for Eberhard Weber before Eberhard Weber's stroke. And I think it was called Endless Days. And again, Eberhard Weber called on Mike DePasqua to come out of retirement and to play on what was, I believe that was his last studio album before his stroke. And very sad that Mike DePasqua has not opted to continue on. And he said something like, "Well, there's a ton of drummers out there with great chops," and that's I don't know. That's to me that's not the way to do it. I mean, because you would never record an album, regardless of what instrument you play, if the parameters for it were simply, well, somebody's a better piano player than me, so I'm not going to record, or somebody's a better guitarist than me, so why should I record? Mike DePasqua had a vision on the drums that very few people have. And it's kind of sad that he continues um, to remain in retirement, and maybe that'll change at some point. I hope so. Okay, I've gone over a half hour, and I don't even know if this is going to upload or whether it's going to be viewable or not, or what it sounds like, or if you can hear the music playing in the background. So I'm going to call it a day for now, and hopefully this is going to leave some of the vinyl here, I guess. And I'll be back. And give me a thumbs up or thumbs down, but feel free to leave a comment and let me know what you think. And just to close on a special effect, I'll give you a little cosmic special effect to end with here.